This video is sponsored by OBSBOT. Now, I'm no stranger to AI cameras, and while many AI cameras kind of do the same tricks and offer the same features, the OBSBOT Tail Air seems to offer something a little bit different to the rest. Primarily intended as a live streaming and multi-camera production tool, the OBSBOT Tail Air actually has a few features that make it uniquely positioned for solo content creators. Featuring a 1/1.8-inch CMOS sensor, this camera can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second and 1080p at 60 frames per second. However, the 1080p 60 I wouldn't really recommend using considering the intended use case and the size of the sensor. The 4K 30 is where you're going to be able to get the highest quality video. The focal length is equivalent to a full frame 23mm. And while this is a PTZ camera, meaning it can pan, tilt and zoom by your controls, the zooming is only digital. So there's going to be a loss in quality, but we'll get into that later. The ISO range is from 100 up to 6400. I am currently at ISO 100 in my studio with an LED lantern light, and I'm currently manually exposed at about 100 ISO, and shutter speed is 1/60, fully 4K 30. The camera supports USB-C, micro HDMI, which I'm using to view myself on a monitor at the moment, a 3.5 microphone jack, which I'm using to use the DJI Mic 2. The camera does have built-in microphones, however these are pretty much only good for scratch audio, so for syncing up sound between other cameras. This PTZ camera has the ability to stay in one place and create different camera movements and camera angles without you needing to touch the tripod. And a lot of this can even be done without touching the remote control app, which we'll get into. Given the form factor of the OBSBOT Tail Air, it actually does come with a hard case, which is really useful and very nicely presented, that actually has the correct dimensions of the camera inside. So when you store the camera, there's no risk of it getting scratched or being damaged. You can just have it stashed away in your bag with no worries about damaging the lens or the gimbal itself. The camera features a indicator light on the front of the camera to indicate whether or not it's connected to Wi-Fi or cellular data, and whether or not the camera is recording or in tracking modes. When you enter any tracking modes, you will notice a blue indicator light, which we'll get into those tracking modes now. So you can use the OBSBOT Start App, which you can download from the Apple App Store or from the Google Play Store. And this is the alternative to connecting the camera to your laptop or computer with software like OBS for live streaming. But of course, you don't need to use any of these things to be able to record video on the OBSBOT Tail Air, but we'll get into that a little bit later. First, looking inside the OBSBOT Tail Air app, we have a few different controls that are really useful. So first, we have our exposure controls. So at the moment, I am at manual exposure and manual white balance for this studio. I tried shooting with auto white balance and auto exposure, but I have to say it was pretty flickery, changing color hues and changing exposure depending on how I changed my face and the reflection of shadow. So I only really use auto exposure if you think you might be changing around a little bit and you don't mind some shifting exposure, maybe in outdoor scenarios. When it comes to the controls that we have available to us, we have several different things that are really fun and interesting to play with. So the first is we have kind of a D-pad like gimbal view. So from here, we can literally just turn the camera left, right, up, down, and you can turn the camera as far as you want. It doesn't go all the way 360 degrees, but it's really, really useful to be able to make those little micro positions. Then you can also change the speed at which this happens. So between the tortoise and the hare, you can go tortoise and create these more like smooth panning motions. So if you had multiple of these cameras set up at once, you could change the position of one while you're streaming from another to be able to change up the camera angles, which is typically how these would be used on a multi-camera production. Possibly the best feature of actually using the app over just using the camera on its own using gestures is the ability to track objects. So we've got the little OBSBOT hard case here, and I can draw a little box around this hard case, and then now I've got the ability to track this box wherever I want, and the camera does a really solid job of keeping it tracked. We are in quite a dark environment at the moment, and definitely all the features work with much more light. The continuous autofocus I think is also pretty good. You can hear the autofocus motors a little bit when you're close to the camera, but I think right now if I go from here back to here, You can see the focus happening. There's a little bit of a lag, but in general, it's still reliable because it actually still finds focus. It's not hunting. It just might take a little while to actually find focus. Also in the app, we have this director's grid, which we can go into and see lots of different versions of kind of our final output. And you'll be able to know what's going into that director's grid from the main controls by seeing this little window at the top right next to our audio levels. So we can tap on this and you will see all the controls go away. And I tap again and I get my controls back. And if I want to, say, create a little window around me, it's going to be like a tighter field of view. This is now the output, but we can see on the app, this is just a red box around me. But that's going to be the final view that's up there in the output of the actual live view. So when I go into the director's grid, we'll see that on air is this little smaller rectangle that's cropped in on my face. But then we also have wide, auto, and face one available. So if I go to face one now, it's a little bit wider, but it should track me a little bit. Yeah, we go. So we're not actually in human tracking right now. It just knows that you want to keep a shot on face one. Now, one of the most fun things about this camera and the ways that you can use this camera without the app is using gestures. So we're going to start this in a couple of different ways. So first, we have human tracking. I just do an open palm symbol. The LED indicator changes to blue. And then the camera's now going to track me wherever I go. Our other gestures include the L symbol to give us a cheeky little zoom. Oi, oi. And then we can do it one more time to get the cheeky little zoom out. Oi, oi. And then if we would like to customize the zoom, in Steve Jobs' dreams, we can do the double L. The LED indicator will flash to say this is activated. And we can do pinch to zoom in 3D. Like you always dreamed of, Steve. And finally, our last command is the ability to stop recording. So just the symbol for OK is enough to stop recording. You should still be able to see me through the live view of the camera, through the app, and you should be able to hear me through the mic too, hopefully. And then to start recording again, you can just do the OK symbol again, and we're rolling again on the tail air. And this is the way that you can actually use the camera without the app whatsoever, which we will showcase when we head outside.
Now that we've got the OBSBOT outside, we can actually attach ND filters. So I've got a few different strengths here, but they also come with a counterweight, because having the ND filter on the front actually does affect the balance of the gimbal itself. The counterweight is just magnetic, so it just slides on the back really simply. And then the ND filters themselves are also magnetic, which you can just pop on the front like that. And then you reduce a lot of that overall exposure. And then we can just use gesture controls to activate it and to start recording. And then you can film outside, just the same as you would when you're indoors. And even using zooms, it's very simple, just as you would inside. And you can control and record yourself however you need. The OBSBOT Tail Air retails for £419. If you want to go check it out, there's a link in the description below this video.